Hello, everyone. My name is Bernard Comrie, and the area of linguistics in which I work is linguistic typology. I would define that as the systematic study of variation across the languages of the world. So paying just as much attention to differences among languages as to similarities between them. Now, when I first started in linguistics, this was a very underdeveloped field. Most people worked on a single language or a single group of languages. And of course, many people still do. But one thing which our field, our subfield, linguistic typology, has achieved over the last few decades is the recognition that it is important for our general understanding of human language to also have broad knowledge of the range of variation that is found across the languages of the world. Even people who are most interested in working on a single language will know much more about that single language if they also know how it differs from other possibilities that are presented by other languages. Now, one thing that is very important for our work in linguistic typology is, of course, detailed knowledge of the various individual languages that are spoken across the world, perhaps somewhere around 7,000 of them. And this is particularly important, particularly urgent when we bear in mind that many, indeed most, of the world's languages are endangered. So in 100 years, many of them will no longer be spoken, certainly no longer be acquired as a first language by children. A few decades ago, someone estimated that maybe 90% of the world's languages are endangered. That was considered pessimistic. Now, if anything, that would be considered optimistic. So in a sense, we're fighting an urgent struggle to document the world's languages before they die out. Of course, we hope that things can be done so that they do not die out, that communities will be encouraged to preserve their languages, but in many cases this will not happen, and therefore language documentation is very important. It's an area where much has been done, but much still remains to be done. There are still many parts of the world, many languages in many parts of the world that have still not been adequately documented. We don't have, for instance, good audio, video recordings of different uses of the language in different settings. I would like to commend my colleagues in Argentina for the excellent work that they are doing in documenting the indigenous languages of Argentina and immediately adjacent areas. One thing which I think is very important in terms of documentation is involvement of native speakers and of the indigenous communities. It cannot be a good long-term strategy for it always to be the case that it is outsiders who are coming to investigate a language, to document that language. For one thing, there aren't enough linguists to go around. There are far more languages than there are linguists able and willing to work on the detailed documentation of languages. Now, mention of documentation brings me to another area that is very important in recent work in linguistic typology, and that is discourse. In the earliest work on typology, let's say when I started in this area in the early 1970s, roughly, it was perfectly normal to elicit material. You would find a bilingual speaker who knows their own language well, also knows English well, and you'd basically ask them to translate sentences from English. Now, this is at best very dangerous. There's a lot of room for misunderstanding. The English sentences might be culturally inappropriate. It may well be that the speaker, in carrying out the translation, is unduly influenced subconsciously by various features of the English original. So now, wherever possible, when we do typology or when we write grammars of particular languages that might then serve later as input to work in linguistic typology, what we try and do now is always to use genuine examples from natural discourse. If we're working with purely oral languages, and that is of course most of the languages of the world, then we will be relying on audio-video recordings. If we're working on a language that also has a written form, then we might also have a written corpus of the language, though you should always bear in mind there are many features of a language that only show in its oral use. Therefore, it is important, even for a language that has a written system, it is important that its documentation should also be oral. And looking ahead to the future, one thing that I dream of the relationship between discourse and typology, is that at some point in the future, it will hopefully be possible for a typologist looking for a particular phenomenon, looking for a particular feature, to go straight to corpora, to go straight to documentation of discourse and find relevant examples without having to go through the intermediary of looking something up in a dictionary or looking something up in a grammar. Hopefully there will be automatic procedures that will take us from the documentation to the typological generalization, or at least to an adequate grammatical characterization of the phenomenon in the language in question. Now, as we look at cross-linguistic variation, it's important to be able adequately to use various quantitative methods to ensure that claims we're making about things being significant or rare or whatever terms we're going to use, to make sure that those are being used accurately. Now, when I was being trained as a linguist, in fact, even earlier when I was in high school, it was deemed that those wanting to study languages didn't need mathematics. So I think I actually had my last mathematics class around the time of my 14th birthday. I studied no mathematics after that. And since then, I have come to regret that. I, of course, have the excuse I am getting on in years. Maybe I have the excuse that it's hard for me to learn new things, but you younger researchers do not have that excuse. Let me assure you, acquiring skills, quantitative skills, that would include statistical methods, etc., discourse quantitative methods, these are essential tools for the linguist of the future, probably whatever area you're working in, but certainly if you want to work in linguistic typology. So I hope to have given you some idea of the field in which I work, what I see as some of its achievements in recent years, and what I see as some of the challenges for the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and my best wishes for your own research projects. Thank you.